ABI.
What is it?
Assume best intentions.
Why do you need it?
How do you do it?
Stay tuned to find out in this episode.
I'm Yuen.
And it's Mike. Welcome to the Imperfect Clinician. Today, we want to draw everybody's attention to ABI, Assume Best Intentions. Yuen, tell us more what it is.
Let's start with a scenario that I have come across myself. So a team were in a meeting and there was somebody fidgeting in their seat, and the meeting kept going on. I was leading the meeting, but I was just getting more and more irritated by that person. I was just thinking, they just can't be bothered. They just want to get out, or is what I'm saying not important? And then when they were walking out, I didn't want it to sit with me. So I said, have you got a minute? So I went back to my room and I said, are you okay? You seem quite restless. And my brain is thinking, yeah, that person's not committed. All the assumption, all the judgments coming. And then that person said, oh no, I couldn't really feel my thighs because I just went for this new exercise class. And so I was just moving to make sure that the bloods are going. And I thought, what? I didn't think of that. I just assumed the worst thing, thinking she doesn't respect me, la la la. And so I wanted to start with this case because I feel it's quite easy to relate to. There probably have been so many situations where you're either in that seat where people don't assume the best intention of you, or whether it's role reversal and you do the same. And we all do, I guess. But what I wanted to show is what happens when you assume the worst in each other, because there will be no trust and there will be no respect.
Okay, I think most of us will be able to, find an example that's similar. I must say that there is always lots of focus on reading the body language so that you can become a better, speaker and all that. But I don't think it's always the best to follow those rehearsed situations, because that can predetermine your conception of everybody else's behavior. And I must say that I was in a meeting, some sort of training ages ago, and they say, we always were told that if somebody's crossing their arms or crossing their legs and sort of leaning backwards, that should be read as, oh, they are in opposition to what you're saying.
Not interested.
They're against. So they're not interested, but even more, they can have even stronger feelings that what you're saying, they don't agree with. And somebody drew our attention, say, how about maybe they're cold? Maybe there's some other reasons why people are doing other things. Body language is a very powerful communicator, but I think that we shouldn't always trust it and assume
That's the only thing.
As the only thing. Yeah. I think we need to be a bit more curious about it, especially in those aspects of people's behavior or their body language that are perceived as negative, as people, turning away from you. And there are some things that we may not be reading correctly. And that's going to impact how we are delivering whatever we're trying to tell people. And that can escalate into something that we might not be able to control later on, because we sort of predetermine ourselves to, try to reach out or try to affect that person in a way that they're going to get back to the conversation, to get back to being interested, and that can have the opposite effect.
I think a lot of these is a bias lens, your own perspective, because I think they come out of how you see yourself and how you judge others through your own lens is a reflection of what you are not confident about or what you are scared of. So, for example, that case I've mentioned earlier on, not being respected or not being listened to,
Being ignored.
ignored. And so you become quite pessimistic about others' behavior. You just assume the worst case scenario.
Mm.
And I wonder whether you, the listener, and you, Mike, whether you can think of a time when you are either growing up or when you're working and someone did not assume your best intention. And how does it make you feel there and then? And how did it change you after?
I remember there must have been a whole list of situations where not contacting somebody for a while could be considered as you're, not engaging with them and you're ignoring them.
Mm-hmm.
This can have an effect on on friendship in general.
Yeah.
There is a number of situations where you weren't making yourself clear enough, or you weren't telling people the full story, and then they weren't thinking that you have either something to hide or you can't be bothered to explain it better to them.
So they're not important to you.
So they're not important,
Yeah.
to engage in general.
And how did it change your relationship with them afterwards?
I think that misunderstandings can have a huge impact on how you are going to perceive this person in the future.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the situation where I wasn't keeping in touch with somebody, and they may assume that over a longer period of time I might have, I don't know, forgotten about them, or are not very keen to carry on with a relationship or
they
friendship.
think they've said something wrong and they've dwelled on it.
Yeah, so going back to the situation when I wasn't keeping in touch with somebody, for a while I haven't been in touch with that person. When we met up, I got questioned, what have they done that I didn't want to keep in touch with them?
And they thought you were angry about something.
They thought that I was angry, thought that I was upset, that I was not bothered about them, or didn't value them as a friendship companion in a way. And that sort of allowed me to reflect, probably later on, I wasn't thinking about that, because you're trying to rectify and explain yourself then when somebody tells you that, because sometimes people may not want to have another discussion with you. I had a situation after my uni where a good friend of mine that we used to spend lots and lots of time, all of a sudden just went, blank and disappeared. And I don't know if that's something because I've done wrong. I can't find him. I couldn't find him on social media, or, and then I found through somebody and I sent them a message, Merry Christmas or whatever. And I never heard back. And I still don't know what I've done, because we used to be very good friends.
Yeah, and when you have situations like this, whether you're in that person's shoes or when you're at the receiving end, when you start to doubt, that's when you get insecure, and really, I want to say, can be quite scary, because you think maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I have. If you're in that shoe, it can be something as mundane as somebody cutting me off in traffic. I used to think, what an insensitive prick. And it used to increase my blood pressure, and I was ready for a shouting match. And then, this is through practice, not easy. Sometimes I still want to shout. But now I'm trying to think, he must be desperate for a wee. Maybe he has BPH, benign prostate hyperplasia, or maybe he's rushing home to a family member who's not well. And whatever that I think, it's not going to change his behaviors because it's already done. It's in the past. He's cut me off. But I can choose my thinking differently and proactively change my response. Because in the latter case, then I just shook my head, stayed calm, and then recognized sometimes I'm not the kindest driver when I'm rushing home to the kids.
Yeah, but in a car, it's very difficult for me to stay calm. But then on reflection, just think, right, yeah, you are absolutely right. It's not going to change anybody else is doing what they're doing.
Exactly.
You just choose effectively by responding in a rather unkind manner, shall we say, to be upset about it. So why would we choose to? I know that we always vote with our feelings, and this is what sometimes we need this as an outlet. I don't know, of some sort of frustration. But then it puts us in a bad mood, and we have only really ourselves to blame, in my opinion. I mean, I do.
Yeah, and you see that a lot now, especially during the start of the pandemic and afterwards. Most of the meetings are not done in person anymore, so most of the meetings are done online. And so I've noticed like a member's been turning off video more than usual. And instead of thinking, oh, it must be multitasking or must be slacking, think about how differently you would react if you think, oh, he's trying to balance home and work, or maybe he's not comfortable jumping the discussion. And I think when you mentioned about that body language, it really changes my body language and my verbal language, because instead of going I want to accuse somebody or I want to criticize someone, I then change into the trying to understand, the curiosity that you've mentioned earlier on. And I'm trying to work with that person to find out a solution. So I'm focusing on what stops him from doing his best.
But do you think also, I completely agree that it is very different when you are exposed to, for example, online meetings more than seeing people in person, that us as clinicians, we rely a lot on seeing people. This is, 40, 50% of examination is even before the patient opens their mouth. Because we observe all those subtle things that, people display in their behavior. So we are, in a way, tuned in to those body language features. So does it make us more assuming what people are actually thinking and feeling, or do you think that it sort of allows us only to focus on people being poorly? I don't know, their frailty is greater. You can notice like a labored breathing or something, that it's more physiological rather than feelings wise.
I see what you mean. So I think when I see a patient face to face, I've got more of a base knowledge because of what I can see, and I can ask questions based on the physical presentation. Whereas if I don't see a patient face to face and it's a telephone conversation, I feel that I have to ask more questions to establish the baseline information. And it actually takes longer because I don't have the 5 seconds somebody walking in my room or opening the door and seeing how that person walking through the corridor to me to do the initial assessment. And
they
now
can already come in angry.
Yeah.
But on the phone, you can't really
exactly.
always sense it.
Exactly. And on the phone, it's when you see somebody, let's say, being unwell, or in your case, you've mentioned about being angry, on the phone, sometimes they don't show that they're angry straight away. It might be a few leading conversation and they just suddenly erupt and you think, did I say something? Or probably they were just angry at the
They might
start.
have got a kid bashing on the back,
Maybe. But the way that I interact with my patients changes when we did that swap to now a hybrid of, either seeing them face to face or seeing them over the phone. But I then don't have a baseline information.
So with regards to the attitude of somebody talking to you, when you see those cues of, let's call them the negative cues, okay? Those that, rolling eyes, people, trying to move away from you or turning round. How do you manage now on reflection, let's say that you're aware of it, how do you choose to respond to it?
I don't want to come across as you approach every interaction with the blind optimism. I think it's more
because it's all based also on experience with that person, and it's a longer sort of process very often, especially in a team or with people you work with.
Yeah, and I think it's a practice in some ways of intentionally assuming whether it's friends or family or work colleagues or strangers. For me, is they are doing their best. So I enter most of my interactions with genuine curiosity and open mind, because I realize when I don't, I create my own story out of fear.
Okay, so is it easier in that respect? Is it easier to assume best intentions with strangers or with the people you work with or with the loved ones?
I think it's easiest when you're able to have most distance. And in my case, the distance is a reflection of how balanced I am internally. So it's a gauge.
Yeah, but when you're looking at the stranger, I think it's a bit easier to assume best intention and say, well, I don't know that person. I don't want to be, judgmental straight away. So I'm going to give them a chance. But if you have people you work with, you know them, you know what they're like, that you know how they can be. But we're not always on 100%, feeling great and positive and loving the world. Okay, not.
Of course.
And on the other hand, not every day is a Monday morning. Yeah, when we are upset, and I think that this is a bit harder to set on aside your negative feelings about people's behavior, about people's intentions, when you have a history of them already being upset or making you upset.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's easier to do that to people that you don't know. Again, you don't have that baseline information, but the people that you work with. But I've noticed that when I assume best intention, even though they've always been that way, I am less resentful. And because I think how I think impacts how I feel, and how I feel impacts on what I do.
So do you think curiosity is the key?
Yes, because my approach to that person then becomes very different. And if you go in thinking, that's it, there's no space for change for that person, like, oh, they're always like this, in some ways you are already shaming that person because you don't give them the space for growth to be different.
True.
And also you're not taking the backstory of why. And I want to say I'm creating that space for other people because I'm hoping that people will create that space for me. Again, like you said, I can't be 100% all the time. And when I don't, I want the compassion to be from others to me and me to others.
Okay, so what if somebody lets you down? Okay, so you have the history of somebody in a team letting you down. How do you prevent assuming best intentions as making excuses for those people?
So I think there are two parts. You assume best intention when you're trying to understand where are they coming from, but the impact is something that you need to follow through and hold people accountable for.
Okay.
So
you still remain curious?
You still remain curious to find out why, but the next part of why you're not delivering, let me work with you, provide feedback. That's what we're going to discuss in the next episode. But that, I think, is really important to make sure that they still take responsible for their words and for their action or inaction.
Yeah, because there's two parts. One is assuming best intentions when people, when observing people's behavior, body language.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing is assuming people's intentions through their actions. So actions are a bit more 0-1. Either something happened or it didn't. So if somebody was late with the job that was really important for you, it's really easy to say, right, they just didn't take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there were some other factors, but they still, they let you down. I think it's very hard to try to understand, find excuses for them where they're not producing whatever work they were doing on time impacts your work life in one to deliver what you have to deliver further on.
I understand, and I think the impact when it happens, it shouldn't be trivialized. It shouldn't be taken lightly. But why are they late? They must not take it seriously. That judgment at the start doesn't help with you trying to deal with the situation constructively. If I go to this person and say, this was really important, and because you were late, these happen, how can I work with you to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Do you have a rule of 3 strikes and you're out or something?
No. So for example, it might be they're a single parent and their child's really unwell and they don't have anybody else, no support network to help them. So when that happen, is there a fallback system? Is there somebody that they can contact at work, or somebody that they can buddy up to understand this project really well? So if person A is late, person B can always stand in, for example. And so you create a support system at work when it's not available for that person at home, but also allows you to provide flexibility. So let's say because of this case, you start later and you work extra afterwards when the project calls for it, not just because. And also you are holding them accountable because of the impact on the project, and you work with them. So it's not just you thinking about solution, it's both parties. Does it work for you? No, it doesn't. Why don't I? I think this works better for me. And then you come across as a partner, in a collaborator in a project, not just you dictating what should be done
I
or
agree
shouldn't.
that working on a partnership level is the way forward here, because it's not really, I don't think if it has a major impact if you're just going to tell somebody off every time something happens wrong. That's not going to lead anywhere. It's going to affect perception of your leadership style, and it's also going to, for example, translate into poor retention. But on the other hand, it's very difficult with each instance of somebody not doing something to a certain level or timing or whatever. It's difficult to do RCA, or the root cause analysis, with every situation like this.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you don't hold people accountable for negative outcomes, because people can mean well but still do harm. And the point is to get them to see the impact of their actions and learn from it. So you still have to apologize, you still have to make amends, you still have to show that you will change and do better because now you know better. Either you do better, or you create a system that is better than the current system.
I've got a question for you in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Is being pessimistic in that respect, because you can assume worst intention in the world, and that would, to me, translate as being just pessimistic person, yeah? Would you consider it as a defense mechanism?
What do you mean?
Sometimes for people who are pessimistic,
Mm-hmm.
they see the world that, you assume that every day is going to rain. So once you wake up and it's beautiful weather, you are just pleasantly surprised. And that sort of setting the standards low, and then in terms of like being pessimistic, and says, oh, nothing exciting is going to happen today. And then something does happen. It comes as a, I don't know, revelation, as something that is actually deep inside desired, but it's not portrayed like this on a daily basis. And on the other hand, if you're optimistic and you say, oh, today is going to be an amazing day, it's going to be beautiful weather, and I'm going to go and have a picnic, and then half of the middle of the day it starts to rain and you are set aback because you cannot fulfill your idea of a perfect day that you assumed for yourself. So is being pessimistic a defense mechanism?
I think yes, but I disagree with what you said about being pessimistic. And if you have a better day than expected, you feel better. Because I want to see
So
as
maybe not pessimistic, but skeptic. I don't know, you're skeptical about things.
yeah, if you are skeptical, but it also shows a lot of distrust and also perhaps show a lot of hurt that you've had in the past that you really struggle to trust. So you started off as being, I'm not trusting anybody until somebody proved me wrong. And I want to say somebody who is more optimistic is somebody who's able to see the silver lining, a glass half full type of person. And even if the day doesn't go well, at least it's not as bad as, something else. And I'm not saying that some people or a person stays in that stage. It's an effort to be aware of what your mindset is and what's causing it and what you can do about it.
Going back to the episode where we're talking about when things go wrong, I think there are sometimes things that are stronger than you. And I mentioned there that whenever somebody rings from work, I'm always assuming that it's going to be something bad, that I've done something bad. I know I can't really still shake it off. Until, and to be fair, it doesn't happen very often. Maybe I'm not exposed to it very often that somebody rings. It's usually somebody ringing, asking for some clarification, and most of the time because they couldn't read my writing in a comms book or whatever. But I think that I consider myself as a rather optimistic person.
I would
Okay?
agree, yes.
I'm always looking forward to good things in the future, but also remain pragmatic in that respect. So I want to say that I look forward to things in life in general, and I'm quite happy about things happening to me, whatever they are. And I always try to find a solution. That's where the pragmatism,
Yeah.
I know that not everything is perfect all the time, but the optimism allows me to bounce back and fix the problem, fix the situation that I come across that it's not really favorable.
I remember you said once when I rang you, I said, I've got two news. Tell me the bad one first. That's
Yeah,
what you said.
yeah.
And I
You
said,
want to get this out of the way
yeah.
first, I
And
think.
I said, there isn't. They're both good news. You're like, okay, fine. Go
Keep
on then.
talking, keep
Yeah.
talking. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes do you think you get into the habit of assuming bad intentions in certain situation? Is it like a habit that you are comfortable with and you just do it to, I don't know, satisfy something else that sits in your head, some sort of vulnerability that you can't shake off, or something that is your building foundation, like being always trying to avoid, I don't know, bad feedback, doing something wrong in general.
Mm. I want to say that that might potentially be a factor for it, because if you're so used to being told off for everything, you just assume the next thing that you do, you'll get told off.
So in that context, I want to try to dive into what could have led to the fact that I can be anxious about certain things. Do you think that there is an impact of limited praise in the past? I don't know, in the childhood, or when you're growing up, or in the relationship with somebody, that the lack of that praise means that you are doing some things wrong all the time or most of the time?
I don't think it's lack of praise. I think it's the imbalance of being criticized all the time. I don't think it's the it's the lack of praise. Because studies have shown if you overpraise a child, it doesn't help anyway. But I think if you criticize a child or when they're growing up, it almost conditioned them to brace for impact each time they talk to you.
Okay, so you have to find a balance.
Yes.
Because I have a very strong belief, I don't know, of feeling of, when I reflected on my relationship, especially with my dad, because that was probably more more direct in that respect. I think that the very limited praise that I had from my dad is now the cause of certain things that I want to get rid of first the bad news that are coming towards my way. Just so if I get 10 emails, I'm just looking at those emails as, oh, this can be serious. Okay, I want to read it first.
You're risk assessing.
Yeah, I'm risk assessing. I'm sort of prioritizing all the possibly bad events first. And it stands in the opposite because I'm usually quite good at solving, problems in most cases. But I can't shake this off. And I think that one thing that I always wanted to ask my dad, and I never did because he passed away. Finally, I wasn't able to let him. I wanted to ask him to tell me 3 things that I've done right. To have some sort of feedback on 3 things that I've done right. Because there was always something that there wasn't unconditional, that's great.
Yeah.
And I bet he would struggle with this. I strongly believe that he would struggle or I think there always would be a but in it or some sort of doubt. So when I bought a house, oh, is it too big? Oh, did you think it through? When I bought a car, I chose because not in line with his recommendations. I don't know. Is it something, am I seeking validation to what I'm doing right? Or do you just want to, find some positive stimulation from your parent or from people that are close to you? I don't know. Is it some sort of confirmation of what you're doing? Do you want to please them in a way? Or
I think
essentially what I'm trying to find out is, does it improve confidence when you praise people? Because I think that it would in my case. Maybe that was an imbalance.
I think there are 2 parts. Yes, you will improve confidence when you praise people. But I think in your case, it's the imbalance of constantly being criticized. And as children, we are biologically wired to please our parents, to seek validation from parents.
And then it later translates into your peers.
Yes, peers. And perhaps into adulthood, some people are still constantly trying to people please because they want to get the sense of belonging. They want to get the sense that I am lovable. And if they're not able to get that from the parents, they get that from other sources.
But that leads me to making sure that I notice those good things in people around me. I'm pushing myself, and I don't want to overdo it the other end. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, too much praise is not good for everything. So I think trying to find a balance, feedback, balance, assumption of intentions is the way forward. I try to make sure that I assume the best intentions in people, and I make a lot of effort to do that. But sometimes things are a little bit stronger than us. But I think it's a big thing to reflect on that and to reconsider that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to reflect and understand where it came from, because you are more aware of the trigger for you. And mine was learned behavior from parent who was operating just out of sheer exhaustion, frustration, and essentially an empty tank. So if I can see an adult not being able to show kindness to themselves, it's learned behavior that I struggle to do that to myself and to others. And for me now, understanding where that trigger is, I know when I'm getting resentful or when I'm blaming, I need to work on setting my own boundaries. So whether it's because I am deprived of sleep or whether I'm overstretched, that's how it comes out. And that's my, what do you call it? Like the monitor, the gauge, where it goes tired, full tank, medium. And this is how I would gauge it for myself. I don't know whether you've noticed, but when you assume positive intention, I think it makes it easier for the other party, whether it's work, colleagues, or friends, to engage in a more productive conversation.
I think so. I can, tell you from myself, if I get questioned every 5 minutes about what I'm doing, and it's sort of in a more vindictive way, you're less likely to enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think it's only normal that you get quite defensive. And if you don't have that as a stepping stone to communication, then you're able to work together better and perhaps more effectively to deal with the situation.
Yeah, I think if I'm given the chance of somebody approaching whatever project I'm doing, or even between us, in the family life, I think it's completely different motivation, and there is a completely different attitude towards, you have a feeling like there is another person supporting you in what you're doing.
Yeah.
You play a big part when you're assuming good intentions from people in their success, I think.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a quote from the author Ian McLaren. He said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." So I wonder, how do you react if somebody hurt you or take advantage of you?
I think that has changed over the years. I think with experience gained, you start to understand a bit better what actually being hurt means to you.
Mm-hmm.
I would split it into people that have an impact on me that I am emotionally connected with,
Mm-hmm.
and those reactions are much stronger. But then working on this relationship or whatever it is, whether it's within the family or within the friends, I think it reduces the risk of somebody hurting you. Whereas in the more, let's call it adult or professional work settings, I've created these boundaries that I say I'm just not having it. And it's much easier for me just to cut it off. It's just easy for me to give that feedback and to fight for what I believe is right. And I think it's a question of, to some extent, of your personal integrity, trying to stick to what is right for you. And if somebody else is trying to hurt you, you're just going to stand on what you believe is right.
I agree. And I think when I get hurt or if someone is taking advantage of me in some way, then I get quite angry. I think I'm human after all, so it's impossible to escape the initial emotional reaction. But this quote by Joyce Meyer that said, "Hurt people, they hurt people." And when I
Yeah,
heard
yeah,
that, it just made me pause for a full 5 minutes thinking, she is right.
yeah.
And I see that in children, I see that in adult, and now I learn to see that they are in pain and they are lashing out. So then they can forget their pain or they're simply trying to protect themselves. And so when I think of it that way, my compassion just starts pouring out for them, but also it makes the hurt less sticky to me.
I think it's, for me, it makes it less sticky.
Mm.
but it doesn't stop me from, there's no mercy for bullies.
No, I agree. I think the boundaries is still important, but this, in some ways, helped me to deal with the recovery.
Yeah, it doesn't sit with you, and you don't care that much.
Yes.
I think of course you care about people being not 100% themselves and, hurting you, but you don't, because the thing is, you don't really have to forgive. You don't have to forget. You can do whatever you like with it. But it doesn't last that long. You can get initially, ignited and get fuming about something, but then you say, is it really worth it? And I think with life experience, you start to, the thick skin that you sort of, metaphorically grow, it's just a question of, I don't really care about it. It doesn't matter to me. I've done it, not interested, and this is not something that I would consider forming for me or beneficial. So I'll just reject it. Doesn't serve me, I'll reject it. That's, take it away with you.
Yeah.
And there is no space for that sort of behavior to be tolerated.
Yeah, and I think all of these, when we talk about relationship in general, this is on a day-to-day setting at work, because in a team, relationships can be strained, can be broken, or can be in silos. And when you adopt assume best intention, you can do your best to break down silos and repair relationships that are strained between other departments or teams. And I think because you're doing that, you're empowering stronger and more connected team.
I think assuming best intentions is essentially caring. It's essentially caring, and it's also being curious about others.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you care, you improve the well-being of the team, both mentally and emotionally. And you change the environment of where they're working. Where I am working, I want it to be healthy.
Yeah, and as best as you can make it,
Yeah.
Nobody's going to work, or there's very, very, very little amount of people that go to work to do things badly or to do things against the team. Yeah, so we just need to enable people to show care.
So I think when you do that, when you empower more connected team, you help cultivate problem solving skills as a group.
And I think you also allow people to tune in the feeling of the group, of the team.
Yes, and you constantly check in on the health of the team. And in turn, the teams can then deal with challenges with objectivity instead of blaming. So it's not you against me, it's us against the problem.
And I think this is going to allow all of us really on reflection of how we approach others, how we look at people's feelings towards us and how they present themselves in front of us, and allow us to decide that it's actually us who in the best part can make a difference to how we feel about what we see. I think it's going to allow us to see, hear, and feel people in a better way, in a better light, more productive, more problem solving, rather than judgmental and discriminatory in one way or another.
I agree. We hope this is an opportunity for you to tap into the practice of assume best intention for a week and let us know how that goes. Thank you for listening.
Until next time. It's about time for Yuen Reads.
Welcome to Yuen Reads. Today's book is called You Are Your Best Thing, edited by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown. This book talks about vulnerability, shame, resilience, and the Black experience. The artwork, spectacular. And usually when I read such a heavy book, I have to pause a few times because I have to let it sink in. Sometimes it can feel quite heavy, but the way this is written, these are like short essays written by different people, and how it was written, it was so drawing for me that I finished it in one setting. And this very rarely happen for a non-fiction, because usually I have to focus on it and process it in some ways, even though Mike would disagree. He always said I read too quickly. So we can't read the same paper because he gets really annoyed with me when I scroll too quickly. So these are stories about a few different people. You have Jason Reynolds, Austin Channing Brown, and you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So you got 20 essays. People who are so courageous that they opened up their hearts and wrote their story down and gave me a glimpse into their difficulties, their hardship. And even though it was heart-wrenching to read the stories, in some ways it was also very inspirational, because the struggles that they have and the resilience that they have to bounce back or to be constantly practicing or fighting what they were doing before just make me feel in awe of them, and also made me feel quite hopeful of humanity in general. Definitely recommend this.
You just listened to the Imperfect Clinician podcast. We strongly recommend you leave your email on our website so that we can let you know directly about any news and free exclusive content for subscribers. If you review us on Apple Podcast or Podchaser, there is a chance we can reach more people seeking support and encouragement.
Reflect on how you are now and let us know about one thing you would do differently after listening to us. We love to hear from you, so please keep the questions coming via direct message, email, comment, or record a voicemail on our website. We will do our best to answer you either directly or via the podcast.
Bye for now, and until next time.